tuned into the hottest paranormal life show on YouTube, Into the Fringe, where we discuss lost civilizations, UFOs, cryptids, unsolved mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe.
Greetings, followers. It is I, Cardinal Sin, and welcome to Into the Fringe number 48. And our guest tonight is the inimitable Walter Bosley. And Walter is an investigator of historical occult mysteries, author of pulp fiction novels, and a screenwriter who has appeared on the History Channel's Ancient Aliens. After 19 years in national security, Walter Bosley is a licensed private investigator in California, where he also runs his small press publishing company, Lost Continent Library, founded in 2002. Bosley has traveled much of the world both on the job and off, including trips through Mexico and South America with David Hatcher Childress. Walter Bosley was born in San Diego and attended SDSU, where he earned a BA in journalism. He has been employed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and is an inactive reserve officer in the U.S. Air Force, for which he served as a special agent of the AFOSI while on active duty, and then worked as a counterterrorism operational consultant for 6 years following military service. Bosley spends his time writing fiction and nonfiction, as well as investigating strange mysteries in between PI assignments. The latest news about Bosley's projects can be found at the following blogs: empireofthewheel.blogspot.com and lostcontinentlibrary.blogspot.com. Walter Bosley, welcome back to Into the Fringe.
Hey, Gil, everyone. It's good to be here again. Always is.
It's great to have you back. I'm really excited to talk about your book, Origin, the 19th Century Emergence of the 20th Century Breakaway Civilizations.
Indeed.
And I assume that for our giveaway today, it'll be a signed copy of that book.
Indeed it will.
Well, thank you very much. You're a very gracious man. I did want to point out, if I can find it, there's another man who wrote a very short book about breakaway civilizations. You might recognize his name.
Yes.
And his book is called The Secret Space Program and Breakaway Civilization. So it's not entirely too different from the title of your book.
Well,
although the inside might be different.
Richard Dolan is the one who coined the term breakaway civilization years ago, and all of us who talk about it in such terms owe him credit for that. Now, I have since started using the term breakaway society, because the word civilization, in my opinion, for what we're talking about, is actually too big of a word. It implies something much bigger than what it is,
mm-hmm.
and than what we're talking about.
So, breakaway society.
Yeah, a breakaway society is, if you look at Richard Dolan's definition of breakaway civilization, a breakaway society it is really what the definition is, and that's a group of people that, and I don't have it memorized by rote, but essentially a group of people who have the means, be it financial or material resources, to not be dependent, so to speak, upon the resources of the civilization or the organization of the civilization that we are all, a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that does not mean, and here's where the word civilization I think implies something too big, because nowhere in his definition and nowhere in the discussion does anyone imply that these people are capable, that they have a completely separate and independent civilization. They are a part of our civilization. It's just that through their financial means and their resources, they are truly independent in that sense of the word, compared to us, if that makes sense. They can essentially do whatever they want with their money. They have access with that money and those resources to develop technologies that we might not enjoy as a part of our everyday civilization.
Mm-hmm.
But they still live here on our planet. They still move among us. They're still members of our civilization. They just have their little club, their little group. Now, I'm not entirely opposed to the concept of a breakaway group. For me personally, it depends on their motives and what they are actually doing with these finances and resources. So that's where I get into, and we'll get into this later, but that's where I get into my idea that there's more than one of these breakaway groups. One particular group, in my opinion, definitely wants to have a lot to do with our world, mainly in controlling it. And the other one appears to not really want to have much to do with us. There are nuances. But I think Breakaway Society is a much more practical, because, these groups do not have cities in the sky. They do not have, fleets of advanced starships like in Star Trek or anything like that. And certainly not any classified space program, has anything like that. What happens is people have a tendency to exaggerate, because it's fun. But when you think in more practical terms, the idea of these breakaway groups becomes actually more believable, even. So
I was thinking we might start out with some of your basic premises, which I will read here. There was a technologically advanced human civilization in remote ancient history. And we're talking antediluvian history.
Indeed. Yeah.
Secret societies and esoterically motivated hermetic organizations sought to recover and reconstruct the lost technology of the forgotten ancient civilizations. The technology of the 19th century airship builders was based on the lost technology of forgotten civilizations preserved and rediscovered. Charles Delshau was not simply an outsider artist, he was telling the truth. American airship builders developed aero technology, and we'll come back to that, in the first black project launched at the end of the Civil War. And 20th century Nazi Germany technology linked to the modern secret space program and Breakaway Society with the Prussian airship builders. How'd I get it so far?
Those are the main points of the book and of my hypothesis, in particular the book of Origin, that I attempt to argue for in the book, if not prove. And yeah, that's pretty much my perspective on this particular topic and topics that I cover in that book.
So, because you write both fiction and nonfiction, although you've written much more nonfiction, I think. Is this speculative history?
Well, yes, and well, I want to say no, but yes, because yes and no is a different thing. No, it's not primarily because as you're learning, as you read the book, I present, the actual historical threads, the historical figures. I attempt to show you how certain things connect. Now, these are my speculations, yes, but not really an alternative history, just more of a complete history, if you will. One of the reasons why some of the uh, less valid theories that we have in our community, such as the alleged German Haunebu saucer and the alleged German flying saucer and their alleged connection with extraterrestrials, is because most of the folks aren't familiar with the details and the facts and the threads I provide in the book Origin in particular. They're not aware of what was being developed in the 19th century in known science and history. Now, since I wrote that book, I've learned even more about what was being done in engineering and physics. And I've got a report at the Walter Bosley channel at YouTube. If you scroll down, I did it this last summer, I should say, since we're in the new year, in which I present even more evidence for what the mysterious Sonora Aero Club that Charles Delshau talks about, and that I go into extensively in the book Origin. It's even more historical evidence for the development of this flying machine technology. In other words, when you see what Delshau describes this Sonora Aero Club doing in the 1850s, and you learn that this was being done, the essential outline of how the same thing worked was published in 1849, you realize, hey, wait a minute, these guys in the Sonora Aero Club were just simply up on the latest advances. And I go into that in the video that I'm speaking of. I believe it's the one on the bell.
Die Glocke.
And anyway, that's what I try to do. What I actually try to do are fill in the gaps. So in other words, what I try to demonstrate, specifically with the book Origin and with some of the other stuff I've done, is that I am not a believer in the Haunebu saucer. I think that's a myth. It's post-war mythology. It's very popular.
It's okay to say bullshit on my channel.
Okay, it is bullshit. The idea that they were in touch with extraterrestrials is more BS. And a lot of people go to this because of the mystery of the bell. Well, as I show in Origin, I lay it out in pictures. The basic technology of the bell was being used by the Sonora Aero Club in the 1850s, and by German immigrants in California. And I show the German thread and connection between this period of the 1850s and these German immigrants and eventually Nazi Germany. And so I show you that this this proof of concept rudimentary version of what the bell is, what they applied with the bell and advanced, had been kind of out there in certain circles for 100 years or longer. So the Germans, with their Nazi bell, what they did was they just applied advanced 20th century electrical engineering to a concept that had been around forever and that some of their precursors had been working on. That's all the Nazi Germany did as far as the bell's concerned. They did not get this from extraterrestrials. They did not turn the bell into the Haunebu saucer.
My understanding
that's a whole other discussion. But
from reading Joseph Farrell's work, my understanding is that Die Glocke had its own power plant that drew so much electricity it would have powered a small city.
Yeah. Yeah, and which is why it's he points out that's why it's also ludicrous to think that the Nazis had some amazing base in Antarctica with flying saucers and all this stuff. There just were not the resources to power something like people like to believe was down there. Did they have submarine pens? You betcha. Did they have outposts? Sure, absolutely. Why not?
Neuschwanland?
Yeah, but and when you really look, and this is another discussion entirely, but and I've done this recently. In fact, I did it in Secret Missions 5. When you look at the whole Admiral Byrd thing and Operation High Jump, you realize, okay,
It's a bunch of bullshit.
they weren't chased off by Nazi flying saucers from the South Pole, but that's that's very popular. But going back to what I try to do is, again, I try to fill in the holes with the threads, the historical threads that I think connect these mysteries we have of the 20th century and of today in a very practical manner. And I want to emphasize that people get disappointed when you say, oh, it's human technology. Oh, there's an earthly answer. Personally, I find it fascinating that it looks like in the 1850s, someone was successfully applying the rudimentary technology of something like the Glocke, the bell, which might have been what modern writers have called the Mercury Vortex engine, which there's reasons for people to suspect was something from this lost civilization before the flood. I find this just as fascinating as any assumption that extraterrestrials came down in
Absolutely.
the 1930s and gave it to us.
Yeah.
But it's real hard for people to shake that ET obsession.
We have a comment from the chat. Lord Ludicrous Plaid is here and says, "It is a cool story, but that's all it is."
There's something, and I assume he's referring to the Antarctica thing. Yeah, they did leave. They were supposed to be down there for months. They left after, I think, 6 weeks. There were some deaths that occurred due to some, we're told some airplane crashes and accidents having to do with the weather. That, as far as anyone can tell thus far, the interview that Byrd did with the Chilean newspaper, that the famous quote and all the assumptions are based on, as far as we know, that was published. And it is interesting. It is interesting that apparently to this day, we've never been publicly told what was discussed between Byrd and certain Congress members once he got back. Now, I have my ideas about this. Personally, I think there's something big having to do with human history under the ice in Antarctica. I think that there's some major archaeological find down there. I think that might have something to do with any secrecy surrounding Operation High Jump. But here's what people have to remember. When you really dig into Operation High Jump, there were thousands of people on that expedition, naval personnel, And at no time have we had anyone come out and corroborate the Admiral Byrd legend,
Right. We have no deathbed confessions or anything like that.
Right. Now that I've said that, and I've said that a couple of places, and I've said that in my book, you watched some knucklehead in this community is going to promoting some so-called storyteller whistleblower who's going to say, oh, I have the, that very thing. And just note, everybody, that it never came up until after it was stated by various people that there's never been another, person to corroborate that. But now suddenly they'll appear everywhere. But here's the thing about that expedition. Admiral Byrd did some great, wonderful things, but when you read the history of that, he was not actually the real effective commander of Operation High Jump. All the sources of the time and after that pretty much politely say that he was kind of a figurehead admiral on that. He wasn't really running the show. He
I
wasn't.
believe he was a rear admiral at the time.
Yeah, yeah, and he was there because he had explored, his previous explorations. His son, Richard Byrd Jr., was an officer on the expedition. You never hear about that. I talk about that in Secret Missions 5, of course, because his mysterious, the weird circumstances around his death have that kind of JFK Abraham Lincoln resonance between Richard Byrd Jr. and Edgar Allan Poe. It's really weird. But what I'm saying is, yeah, I think it's interesting that I think there was probably something interesting that happened down there during high jump. It's not what the popular legend is, but I think, definitely something interesting was found down there, and has everything to do with the secrecy that we have around Antarctica today.
Yeah. What do you think about the more recent voyages by figures like Buzz Aldrin, John Kerry, and others that went down to visit Antarctica all about the same time?
Mm-hmm.
And Buzz Aldrin's cryptic tweet, which I believe was deleted, that there is something down there and it's evil.
Yeah. Right. Yes. And this is what I was referring to with the modern mystery. Look, it's my opinion that there is something there that, for whatever reason, for whatever it is, whatever the nature of it is, would be kind of seriously impactful on everybody's perception of what human history is, or the history of this planet is. Now, there's a spectrum there of possibilities. It is either, and I think there's ruins, okay, of some civilization, a lost civilization, if you will, regardless of any of the other things I'm going to mention are true. I think there's ruins. In all scenarios, I think there are ruins down there.
There's definitely a pyramid down there.
Well, that's the reports. And sometimes mountains and things with shadowing can look like something that they're not.
Tricks of light and shadow.
Until we get a ground team down there to definitively say, oh, look at this, it's a pyramid. Now, would I be surprised if there's a pyramid? No, not at all. But here's the spectrum. It's either something to do with a lost civilization, the remains and relics of which would surprise the hell out of everybody, meaning an advanced technological civilization, and it would go against the linear history that we're all taught. So they're like, oh shoot. Now, on the issue of Buzz Aldrin's comment, great evil, what could that mean? Could it be that this lost civilization did something damaging or extremely destructive, okay, from which our legends of Atlantis and cosmic wars and all this stuff comes from, like in the Ramayana? Could there be evidence that they had developed some machine or an attempt to turn Earth into a machine, and it went wrong, okay? And what Buzz means is an evil with a small e, meaning, humankind misusing technological knowledge or arcane knowledge. Now, the other end of that could be also some natural. I don't know why he would use evil, but we hear that the hole in the Van Allen belts. There's a big gap down there at the South Pole, and it's the perfect place to launch craft in and out of space, because you don't have to go through the Van Allen belts. All those moon landing deniers and moon landing hoaxers, they're always talking about the Van Allen belts. You can't get through the Van Allen belts. Well, horse pucky, you can from Antarctica. Now, what does this possibly imply? It possibly implies that maybe someone or something in ancient times came to our planet, and the reason they landed there was because, it was the best place, to come back and forth.
Never mind the equatorial extra push that rockets get from.
Right, sure, yeah, but fine, there's that, but as far as they say that it's some straight shot. Now, the other possibility, again, we're still on Aldrin's comment about some great evil.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the Nazis or someone had developed something that was found down there. I don't know. I'm just pulling this out of the air. Maybe they were developing a bomb. Maybe they were, again, trying to leash the global magnetic structure of the planet for some type of global weapon or whatever. Or maybe it is someone from another world. Remember, I'm not opposed, never have been opposed to the existence of extraterrestrials. I just don't think they're so prevalent and explain everything. But that doesn't mean they haven't been here, and I don't think they haven't been here, and I don't think that they come here. Not at all. I think they do and have.
So would it be correct to say that your view is that you don't eschew the ETH, but you just think it's weak sauce?
Yeah, here's the best way for me to, let's look at it in terms of UFO sightings, because this really explains where I'm coming from on this. I do think that, and this is my general rule of thumb, I think about 90% of legitimate UFO sightings, I'm not talking about the lies people will tell just to be part of the fun, I mean legitimate UFO sightings, I think 90% of them are classified human technology, be that of militaries or of aerospace companies developing something, or secret groups, breakaway societies. In other words, classified meaning it's not known to the public, okay? And it's not even known to most military personnel, blah, 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 what have you. I think that would explain 90% of legitimate UFO sightings. Now, that leaves 10% not explained by classified human technology. And in that 10%, you'll have the ET hypothesis. But the ET hypothesis, in my opinion, does not suck up that remaining 10%. Okay? Mm-hmm. It's a part of it. There are other possibilities. Now, people say, oh, darn you, Walter, you want to kill our fun. I want you to think about this. A couple of years back, MUFON, for example, the very checkered and
worried past.
Yeah, the troubled MUFON still, in the statistics I saw, they said, okay, there's roughly 5,000 UFO reports in a given month. And I think I looked at April of 2019. And the source I said, MUFON said 5,000 sightings around the world. Now, under my rule of thumb, that means 10% are not explained by human technology. Okay, so that would be 500. Now, not all of those worldwide are going to be ET. There's going to be other things. But let's say ET accounts for 10% of the 10%. That's still 50 UFO sightings around the world in just one given month that I think could be extraterrestrial.
And, 50. Of course,
it only takes
even one of those stories is true. Yep. It's the biggest story in human civilization.
Right. So, folks, when you hear me say 90% this and that, when you look at the numbers, I'm still giving a huge margin for extraterrestrial visitors.
It's still like a fraction of a fraction.
Yeah, but it's still a fraction of a fraction. Now, that said, I think with Antarctica, we could very well be talking about something extraterrestrial. And it is troubling that Aldrin said great evil. So does that...
Well, it was a great enough evil that it gave him a heart attack.
Well, that or just the just the rigors of being down there, the rigors
Yeah,
of getting there,
at his age, yeah.
yeah, and his age and everything, but still a
But
great
he could
people.
still punch that guy out.
Yeah. Well, so it's like, what the hell scared, and it did. I think that was a very natural fear reaction. A guy like Buzz Aldrin, um, what did he see down there? Remember, John Kerry, if I'm not mistaken, was down there on election night.
Right.
This
Yes.
was 2016, right?
Yeah.
He was down there on he was Secretary of State
Yes.
at that time. What is the United States Secretary of State doing in Antarctica, the South Pole, on election night?
I guess matters of state?
And if he's doing matters of state in Antarctica, exactly who the hell is down there? Now, here's what's interesting about that. It is also a little known fact that presidents are known to visit San Carlos de Bariloche, okay, in Chile, sometime early after getting elected. San Carlos de Bariloche is well known to have been one of the places that Hitler fled to, and that has certainly, this is a matter of fact, folks, not speculation, has been an enclave of post-war Nazis.
And you said Hitler. Did you mean Nazis or did you mean Hitler?
Adolf Hitler himself is suspected, this is even by the FBI, to of course have fled, to have survived, not died in the bunker, and have gone to South America. And one of the places that is most seriously considered that he went to, because he moved around to different places, is San Carlos de Bariloche. And what's interesting is, why would U.S. presidents go visit there? And then you have the Secretary of State down in Antarctica on election night. Now think about 2016, and who was running, and all the connections and implications. Think, for instance, about Tom DeLonge talking about when the Hillary Clinton administration happens.
Yeah. God forbid.
Sorry. Thank God it didn't. Then all this UFO information and all this stuff, of course, that didn't happen. But the U.S. Secretary of State, who's probably expecting to have some job, if not continue in that position, if Hillary Clinton were to be elected.
In the new administration.
Yeah, in the new administration. There he is, of all places, on election night in Antarctica. So we have to ask, is there someone down there or something down there? There is enough of a mystery. There is enough high strangeness with this.
It's like the beginning of an episode of Night Gallery.
Yeah, it's and not only did you have John Kerry and Buzz Aldrin saying there's a big evil down there, you had the Patriarch of Eastern Orthodoxy. You had, I believe, one of the Pope's envoys, if I'm not mistaken, if not the Pope himself. But remember, we have a South American Pope, which is interesting in itself. But it's, they say, well, the Patriarch went down there to bless some type of chapel or something. Okay.
Antarctican chapel. Right.
Why would the Patriarch is essentially, for folks who don't know, the Pope of Orthodoxy. Even though he's not a Pope.
Do you mean of Russian Orthodoxy?
Well, by default, yeah.
Okay.
But essentially, the Pope, the leader of Orthodoxy, is called the Patriarch, and by default Russian Orthodoxy, but Russian Orthodoxy is Eastern Orthodoxy. You have your Orthodoxy in America, and just like with Catholicism, you have some American, Catholic churches and dioceses that kind of don't go exactly with the Vatican, but officially, yeah. So you're telling me that a bishop, say the bishop of Patagonia, whatever Patagonian bishopric there is down there in Eastern Orthodoxy, that a bishop couldn't go down and bless that, in the name of.
Nope, it's got to be the Pope.
But the patriarch himself goes down there. It's really interesting. And then after this, we have the Catholic Church. We have the Vatican talking about extraterrestrials as possibly around it. So here we are still talking about the extraterrestrials being involved in this Antarctica thing. And I have no problem with that possibility. It's a fascinating mystery. The whole Antarctica thing fascinates me as much as it does anyone else, even though we may all come from different perspectives. There's something weird going on down there.
So, before we jump back into deep time, let's jump back a little bit. And like I've told you before, we have a pretty intermediate audience here. But for those that don't know, can you give us a brief history of the Sonora Aero Club and Charles Delshau?
Sure. Charles Delshau was a young German immigrant who came to the United States in the 1850s, early 1850s, and he processed through in Texas, not in New York. And he, what we know for sure about him was he lived in Texas. He became a butcher, and when he died in 1923, there were found several books, hundreds, thousands of pages of these illustrations he did of these weird-looking contraptions, many of which look like classic UFOs, and a diary. And in these books and in this diary, he claimed that he had been sent from Germany to the United States to report on a group of German immigrants. Yeah, there we go. There's a few examples. That's a Delshau's art right there, Charles Delshau's art. And anyway, Delshau claimed in his diaries that he was sent to report on the mysterious, what we call the mysterious Sonora Aero Club. The Sonora Aero Club out in California, who were allegedly, according to Delshau, experimenting with and building flying machines in the 1850s, in the Tuolumne County towns there in California. Now, Tuolumne County is just on the western side of Yosemite National Park. To give you an idea of where it's at, it's what California calls the gold country. That's where a lot of the gold was found and being mined and such. And
not to be confused with the Inland Empire.
That's right. So Delshau makes his way to California. He meets Peter Menes, one of the Germans in the Sonora Aero Club. It's mostly
Wait a minute. The guy's last name was Menes?
Mennis. Yeah. Peter Menes.
Like Dennis.
Yeah. Okay. And so Delshau gets out there. He meets Peter Menes, the German leader. Now, there were a few Italian immigrants in the group, but it was mostly German immigrants. And he meets them. He observes them, their designs, some of the arrows that were built, and he observes these things flying. Well, he comes to like them a lot, and he likes America a lot, and he kind of becomes friends with them. And eventually, the people who sent him, who he calls NYMZA, N-Y-M-Z-A, in his books, they are a German-based organization who essentially are the sponsors, so to speak, of the Sonora Aero Club and other such clubs Delshau refers to but does not identify. They remain a mystery. But NYMZA sends one of their representatives to California to check on Delshau and the progress of the Sonora Aero Club, and to request of them that they create one of these arrows for military purposes. Well, Delshau.
Let me cut in and ask you briefly, can you tell us what an arrow is? Because so far, some people might think it's a bow and arrow.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Arrow, spelled A-E-R-O, was the word Delshau used for the flying machine. So when you hear me say arrow, I'm referring to these flying contraptions like Gil showed you the illustration from my book. So this guy, this representative directly from NIMSA, he was referred to as that Prussian officer, and the German immigrants did not like him. Delshau did not like him, and this was the cause of this rift between the Sonora Aero Club and the home office, so to speak, NIMSA, because the Sonora Aero Club members did not want to build these flying machines for purposes of war. For military use, and that's what NIMSA wanted.
As a matter of fact, as I recall, they were adamantly against it.
Yeah, oh, yeah, exactly. And of course, it wasn't long after this that Peter Menace, we are told, dies in a fiery crash of one of the arrows. Now, was he sabotaged and murdered? Did he fake his death? We don't know, but it was that prompted the breakup of the Sonora Aero Club. As far as we know, as far as Delshau knows, he returned to Texas where he spent the rest of his life, and he started writing the story down in 1893 and doing the illustrations. Now, it's important to note that the 1890s Airship Mystery did not begin until, about 3 years later, when he started the beginnings of writing what he wrote. The bulk of what he wrote and illustrated, I believe, was between 1899 or 1898 and 1923 when he died. So a lot of folks see Delshau just as an outsider artist. They think that they say that he made it all up because the Airship Mystery, which began in 1896, inspired him, and this was all just a fantasy. However, the issue of the Nazi bell is the little problem in claiming that Delshau made all this up, because in Delshau's artwork, remember, Delshau died in 1923. He was not around for Igor Wachowski's or Joseph Farrell's books in our times on the Bell mystery.
Or even very advanced
aircraft.
Yeah.
In his illustrations, and I show this in my book and talk about it in other books, is the bell, the rudimentary proof of concept Die Glocke. And Delshau illustrates this the way he describes how it works, and this is the mechanism which Delshau states prior to 1923 that Peter Menace and the engineers of the Sonora Aero Club used for lift, or anti-gravity, and propulsion. Okay, now it was very rudimentary, folks. We're talking proof of concept. They did not have the electrical power, these, so don't.
Or certainly atomic power, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so how in the heck, did Delshau, prior to 1923, depict identically, essentially, something that we have very good reason to suspect that Nazi Germany was developing during World War II, starting 10 years after Delshau died. Now, that's a depiction of the Nazi bell, one artist's conception of it. And in Delshau's drawings, you even see the bell-shaped device, and there's the rotation and everything. Now, here's what further adds to the mystery. I want you to think about this. It was a group of German immigrants, okay, being sponsored by a Prussian, soon-to-be German organization in the 1850s that was developing this rudimentary, primitive version of the bell, okay? And then it was, in the next century, about 70 years later, German scientists who were, we have reason to believe, developing the Nazi bell, gee, do you think there's a German thread connecting what the Sonora Aero Club was doing in Nazi Germany? I think so, and that's what I go into in my book. I show you how through the 19th century, the other little problem for the Delshau was making it all up crowd is that in the 1890s, Airship Mystery in the United States, the descriptions of what people were seeing, the descriptions of what the witnesses who talked with the crewmen and the pilots and the builders of these airships offer are also to be found in this technology of the Nazi Bell, and essentially the basic concepts of the rotation, the anti-gravity,
the counter rotation,
the spinning things,
the
and
torsion
stuff. So
physics.
here you have 40 years after the Sonora Aero Club was messing with this stuff, and roughly 40 years before the Nazis would have been developing the Bell, there's yet another piece of evidence that somebody was working with this, technology of what we called the Bell. Okay. And to me, and I present the threads in my book, to me, this suggests that the Nazi Bell was very much, at the end of human development of messing around with this idea, with this concept. It wasn't.
Didn't it end up killing several officers? Because it was unstable, and in Joseph Farrell's book, he talks about that.
Killed some of the scientists and things like that with the Nazi Bell. Yeah, but the point is, there's enough threads there, historical threads, that the Nazis did not get the idea of the Bell from space aliens or downed, crashed flying saucers. That's a popular myth people like to cling to, but when you look closely, it's just not likely the case.
And while we're on this subject, very briefly, let me ask you, Walter, do you think that there is sufficient evidence for even one modern crash retrieval?
Oh, I think I think it's sufficiently logical to suspect that there has been one. As far as evidence goes, that's another discussion. I for years now have doubted that Roswell had anything to do with extraterrestrials. And I go into what I propose is a possibility, but I don't know for sure, in my book Shimmering Light. But
the House of Anu.
That's part of the long subtitle to the book. I think I propose in that book that it was America's first attempt at manned space flight, and I lay out the reasons why it would be so tightly held secret. I go into that in that book. There's reasons for it to remain secret to this day. Very logical, good, rational reasons. But
we have a chat from Rui Pereira. I apologize for murdering your name. Hellboy, great movie. And he was referring to the comment that Lord Ludicrous Plaid made before. Didn't Hellboy come through a portal from the Bell?
Yes, yeah. It was. I think Rasputin's out there, and they're messing with the Bell and stuff. Yeah, they Mignola.
That was a great movie.
Yeah, I actually like the second one even better, Hellboy and the Golden Army, because
Really?
it has to do with Hollow Earth and the Tuatha De Danann, and that's who's depicted in it roughly. And yeah, I
really wish that Guillermo del Toro had manned up and made the third movie, even though, we know from the comics that it has kind of a downer ending. But Hellboy had a purpose, and that was Armageddon. And in the comics, it's spelled right out what happens when he uses that big, you know, kind of the thing,
The fist thing.
or Benjamin Grimm's big old fist.
Yeah, exactly.
It inserts right into the eclipse machine that wipes us all out. I really would have liked to have seen that.
Well, the other version of Hellboy didn't do so well, so maybe Del Toro will
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
grace
Yeah,
us with
maybe
that.
after a decade he'll come back to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's disappointing that he didn't do at the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft like he wanted to do, but Ridley Scott's Prometheus apparently discouraged him from doing that because it borrows heavily from Mountains of Madness. So maybe he'll revisit that as
Yeah.
well. We'll see.
So now that you've painted the picture of sort of the modern beginnings of what it looks like that there were American airship builders that got airships aloft before the Civil War. Let's go ahead and go back to that deep time, like we talked about at the beginning, about these antediluvian civilizations or societies, and how the Mahabharata paints the Vimanas and all these kind of things, and where they got their ideas from.
Right. Yes, I just like with the Nazi flying saucer myth, there are some erroneous assumptions with this whole issue of what literature do the Vimanas appear in. And there is a book that people, when they're referring to the Vimanas, now what a Vimana is reportedly this flying craft from ancient antediluvian, way old times, back in the days of India before it was India, the civilization that we see remnants of in India. And whereas the Ramayana and the Mahabharata do indeed talk about amazing technologies, okay, specifically the popular idea of the Vimana and specifically the Mercury Vortex engine are not actually mentioned in the classical historical stuff per se. This was fleshed out in a book that was first written in 1908 but was not translated into English. It was in Sanskrit, not translated into English until, if I'm not mistaken, 1954, well after Delshau died, by the way. But in this 1908 book, it talks about the idea of these ancient Vimana craft using the Mercury Vortex engine. And for all intents and purposes, it's the same basic principle in the bell. And that is, you have the rotation, you have the liquid mercury soup, as it were, some mixture of the liquid mercury and heat, okay? And this causes lift and propulsion and everything. When people talk popularly about Vimanas, and they refer to this book, which I will not even begin to attempt to pronounce. It's in my books. It has the title is two words that start with S. And I
know the one you're talking about.
I don't want to butcher it. People refer to that, and they assume that that is an ancient text itself, or directly from an ancient text, and it's not. It's 1908, but the author was a scholar. So what does that mean? In now proceeding to answer your question, it means that people for 100 years or more have been trying to figure out how the things that are talked about in the classical text, how they may have worked. So a lot of this development looks like it was from ancient ideas, and not just ancient ideas from of things that are mentioned or alluded to, hinted at in the Ramayana and the ancient Hindu stuff. But there in ancient China, there were some interesting things being done, and in various civilizations around the world. We all know of the story of the Library of Alexandria, and we all know what a tremendous loss that was for humankind, because the knowledge in there, the accumulated knowledge in there, if that library had not been destroyed, and the civilizations that continued right on up to ours had the benefit of all the stuff that was in there, much of which what was lost, we might be way more technologically advanced, or significantly at least, than we are now. Now, here's another thing. People think, oh my God, the Library of Alexandria, when it was destroyed, we lost it all because it was all in Alexandria. And that,
Yeah,
that
and back then they tended to keep all their eggs in one basket.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. At the time of the Library of Alexandria's destruction, there were already 2 other repositories that had much of the same information as Alexandria did, and one of them was in Constantinople, in the archive there, which, by the way, was raided by European knightly orders during the Fourth Crusade, the infamous Fourth Crusade that was supposed to go on.
Would these be the ancestors of the Knights Templar?
Well, the Templars. Here's the thing: the Templars did not.
I didn't. I meant the antecedents, not the ancestors.
Yeah, the Templars, when they realized what was being planned, they really didn't want any direct involvement in sacking.
They got ready to put all that stuff on boats and go.
Yeah, their resources were used by the Venetians, by Venice, the bankers in Venice and stuff that were behind this, but they didn't really want to be a part of sacking Constantinople. Now, the Teutonic Knights of Germany, who
funny how Germany keeps coming up and up and
the
up.
Teutonic Knights definitely participated enthusiastically in the sacking of Constantinople, and they were direct beneficiaries of the raid on the archive, which had a lot of this lost information. And funny thing is, the Teutonic Knights were real close with the Prussian culture that led to Germany, the very same group of people who would have been the founders of NIMSA. Okay, so it suggests that perhaps the technologies that NIMSA-sponsored groups were experimenting with were concepts that had been captured at Constantinople during the Fourth Crusade, centuries before. And
well, that would have made those secrets truly very important.
Very important.
As the Templars expected they would be.
Yeah, and keep in mind, people say, oh my gosh, they captured flying saucer technology from No. What it is certain concepts that had been developed to a point in the ancient world. These beneficiaries that got this stuff centuries later, through the benefit of how technology had advanced in post Alexandrian, post Constantinople sacking times, would have been able to develop the basic concepts. Case in point, the Sonora Aero Club would have had the knowledge of the mid-19th century, okay, to apply to this concept of a rotating Mercury vortex engine, just like Nazi Germany had the benefit of electrical engineering of the 20th century to apply to the same rudimentary technology. So what it is you're right, the concepts, okay, of with amazing potential this is what was in the ancient world. How far they developed it in practical sense, we can only guess. But it's these concepts that, as technology progressed, humankind was able to advance the iterations of the concept, right? So this is what it looks like happened after the sacking of Constantinople. See, these orders, these armies were supposed to go on to the Middle East. That was the alleged plan, but all along it was for Western Europe to sack the Eastern Empire. What it was Rome. It benefited the bankers that Rome wanted the East brought down. Okay. And so the bankers were like, okay, Vatican, sure, we'll go along with that. We'll help you, because there was also an issue of gold and silver. The West valued gold and based the coinage and stuff on gold, and other parts of the world on silver. And, they wanted the dominance of gold. It's all this central. I recommend you read Joseph Farrell's book, the Babylon's Banksters, and the Financial Vipers of Venice, to get that perspective on this. But the Templars, even though they didn't want to be part of the physical sacking, the military operations, does not mean that they didn't get their hands on some of this information, because this sacking of that archive, essentially, think about it, essentially Enlightenment and the Renaissance blossomed after this, which implies, and more than implies, that whatever they got was so enlightening that the Renaissance would have been inevitable. After gaining such knowledge, certainly finding the New World and developing the New World, the Americas, was a result of this, because the portolans and the maps of the Americas, which Western Europeans didn't know about, only very few did, this had everything to do with the exploration of the Americas and the opening up of the New World, as I talk about in Secret Missions 5, Veiled Destinies, and others, have pointed out historically. But it goes back to, think about it. If this stuff we're talking about was among the ideas and the concepts captured at Constantinople, the stuff at Constantinople was from the ancient world. It was from the antediluvian world, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we go back to, there's a long human line of development of amazing technologies. We don't need to have had extraterrestrials come down and give us this stuff.
Right.
We don't need to have had extraterrestrials come down and teach us how to build the pyramid.
Although, as you note in, I think, more than one of your books, and we've discussed on this channel before, Walter, that almost every civilization, tribe, whatever you want to call it, has a sky gods concept in their mythos.
Sure. And I do think that happened. See, here's how I see it. Yes, the farther you go back in human history, somebody from another planet came here for whatever reason. Now, there is a line of thought, and much has been written about this. I recommend you go way back to Joseph Farrell's early writings, the Cosmic War stuff, but also in the Ramayana itself, there are these stories of, these beings coming from the sky, and the idea that there was a war going on out in space, and one faction came to this planet either to lick its wounds after some massive battle, or just in the course of operations, they come here. There's evidence that there was a technological civilization once on Mars, and look at the work of John Brandenburg.
We will actually look at the work of John Brandenburg very closely soon.
Yeah, good. And that gives you reason to think that there was some type of nuclear type of devastation.
Yeah, there are noble
Technological.
gases on Mars
Yeah,
that can't be explained by
right.
any other means other than nuclear detonation
Yeah.
nuclear weapons.
So where might some of the survivors had gone to? Here, they might have come to Earth. We
We could
all,
be Martians.
yeah, we all probably have, to varying degrees, a bit of the DNA of human beings that have come from other planets. And so I do think the farther you go back, you are going to find that this happened, and naturally they would have shared. We have in our stories the beings from the sky come down. They teach humankind how to make this, how to do that.
Yeah,
Not
they
just
bring the gifts of civilization,
yeah,
agriculture, how to make
how to
weapons,
how to make weapons, how
blades.
to defend your civilization,
Hmm.
and even cosmetics for
Yeah.
the ladies, and so all manner of things. And so yes, in a particular way, you can say extraterrestrials gave us some things, but my point is that meant that the ball was in our hands. You go back farther, they said, "Oh, here, you Earth humans, here's how you do this, here's how you do that." And the things we, Earth-based humans, have accomplished with this over the eons, um, I think is potentially astounding. I think we have had um, Earth-based civilizations come and go, of course. So in a way, yeah, extraterrestrials have given us something, I think, but I think a lot of the things people assume, oh, the extraterrestrials had to be involved with this. No, I think as a result of what they may have taught us and given us, we did those things.
And I remember reading in Origin, your book,
Hmm.
that there's a good case to be made. Uh, but show your Gorn, please.
Oh, the
There
Gorn.
we go.
There he
He's
is.
drinking out of the Gorn. Um, that's how you know it's actually Walter Bosley and not a duplicate.
Yeah, this is
Um,
a tiki mug that's part of a set I got. The other one is supposed to be Captain Kirk,
oh,
and this one's more fun. I got it from my
I
niece.
had a tiki. I have. I'm in the process of moving. I have a tiki lawgiver that I was going to break
Nice,
out, but I forgot to bring it back over here. But
nice.
there's also a school of thought that these gifts of civilization were brought not necessarily by extraterrestrials, but by some of these older human civilizations from the antediluvian past
Hmm.
that, whether you want to call it Atlantis or Lemuria or whatever, sort of scattered to the four corners of the earth
Yeah.
and taught all of these other civilizations virtually the same thing,
Well, yeah,
because you find so many similarities
right,
in cultures around the world.
right. I think to make it more clear, what you're talking about, Atlantis, Lemuria, whatever they were, the
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 leftovers of an advanced civilization.
yeah, the Rama Empire. I think that the things that they used to build their empires were these things that long before maybe people from other worlds came and taught us, like we were talking about a few minutes ago. I think that led to the rise of these pre-flood antediluvian Atlantis, Lemuria, Rama Empire, all that thing. So that's an example of what I'm talking about. We would have learned this stuff a long time ago, and that led to us building these civilizations that have come and gone. And that shows you how long humankind has actually been playing with some of this amazing technology, which again is why I say we don't need to have had a crash flying saucer. Somebody's been playing with this stuff in human history for a very long time.
Hmm. So let's continue with the chapters in origin as you talk about in the beginning of the book, Delshau, the Sonora Aero Club, and then the antediluvian past and the civilizations that may have been involved in some sort of cataclysm or whatever, and then how that impacted the very earliest modern human civilizations. For instance, I personally find it very interesting that Teotihuacan is the oldest city in the world, and it means new city. So help us understand how we get from these ancient, lost, forgotten antediluvian situations to situations in the more modern world that capitalize on the understanding of that technology.
Well, I think we owe a lot to private groups. These groups we're talking about, who, the Renaissance, for example, did not just happen out of thin air. There had been people through the Dark Ages that were very careful with the knowledge of these ancient secrets and this ancient history, this technology. They had to be careful because of the religious superstition. The Dark Ages simply meant an era of ignorance and superstition and fear, and not a whole lot of development. And I remind you that this was the Dark Ages of Europe. The other civilizations around the world were not going through the Dark Ages.
And thank goodness, the Arabic civilizations preserved science and mathematics and so on.
And
astronomy.
We'll talk about a civilization that's kind of disappeared. The Middle Eastern civilization that really developed all that stuff, and they're not the Middle East civilization of today. Even they are kind of a lost civilization themselves. The Middle Eastern cultures of today and societies of today, they're merely the inheritors of what came before them.
I think that even ancient Egypt was a legacy civilization.
A lot of people do, and there's good reason, to think that. So you had the Renaissance was a reaction to the Dark Ages and really the sacking of Constantinople, and the fact that some people knew about the New World, the American continents. Some people knew about them already.
It seems pretty obvious that the former Crusaders, if you will, the former Knights Templar or their descendants had maps of the New World.
Sure. Yeah. And when you look,
they knew where they were going.
Yeah. When you look closely at what Christopher Columbus, it's widely suspected now by, legitimate historians, mainstream historians, that, Columbus, it's very possible that in 1485 he had already made a voyage to the Americas. In other words, 1492, he already knew it was here. And
he wasn't looking for India.
Right. And he knew it. He knew that these were new continents. And the time I talk about this in Secret Missions 5, essentially, the European masters of European civilization, Western Europe, and primarily, and of the Renaissance, decided it was time to open up the American continents for exploitation. And so, voila, hey, look what we found. Well, you guys have kind of known about them for a long time because...
And a great case in point, if I may, is, the History Channel Oak Island thing. It's absolutely a fact that there are tin mines in Canada that are all mined out.
Well, yeah, that's what I was getting to. Was
There are copper mines that are all mined out.
in the
And
days of
where did
Solomon.
they go?
In the
Where did
days,
all these ores go?
yeah, in the days of Solomon, when you read the description of how many days it took them to sail to where the mines were, how long they were gone and come back, you do the math and it's like, oh, they were coming to the Americas. And the Phoenicians, there's all sorts of evidence that the Phoenicians were the ones coming here mining the tin in the Great Lakes regions and all of this. So yeah, people knew that in the maritime culture, certain people knew in certain knightly orders like the Templars, of course they knew. And it just, when they decided that they wanted to exploit the resources, they knew we're going to need manpower. So, oh golly, it's time to announce the discovery, and then that way they'll have countless people getting over there, and then they can use them to, who they don't enslave over here. They can, they can use the pilgrims, the adventurers, the explorers, and the like, to exploit the
people
the
running
resource.
for their lives from the Catholic Church.
Pardon?
The people running for their lives from the Catholic Church.
And of course, the Catholic Church made sure that they were, in on the whole thing, but fortunately there were people that knew what they were up to and stood against them. It's interesting in the part of Secret Missions 5 Veiled Destinies where I get into the long bit about California. You had during Mexico's, I think it was 50 years of ruling California, you had members of their secular government who knew what the Vatican was up to, knew what the church was up to, and they pushed through a more secular law in California. And this was a good thing. I mean, for the same reasons that the founding fathers of the United States says, hey, there's got to be a separation of church and state officially. The Mexican leaders of Mexican California, even though it was a brief period of time, they passed this Secularization Act. And, the mission system, the church system, they were hoarding all the land. And they said, no, that
belongs to the church.
Yeah, it don't belong to the church no more. The church gets its actual buildings and its crops and stuff. But not only does the land belong to the European or Mexican citizen immigrants, American immigrants of California, a lot of it's going to go back to the natives. They were, but that's a whole other discussion, how cruel the church could be to the natives. But they changed their game around for political reasons in the 20th century and suddenly became the shepherds of the needy and the poor put upon folks, whereas before they were whipping them and keeping them in chains. That's a whole other discussion. But and the Templars were very much coming over here after the Viking era, shortly after the Viking era, and very much were involved in Freemasonry, okay, which was very much involved with the founding of the United States and the general development of the Americas. I'm not the first person by any means who said that, the United States, they say it's a Freemasonic country. It's even more specifically a Templar.
Oh, now I get it. Masonic jars are hermetically sealed. Nope, I screwed that joke up. Now I get it. Mason jars are hermetically sealed. I'm sorry.
I get it.
Totally screwed the pooch on that.
That's good, though. I like that. Yeah, it's real. There is, I think the overall picture here is that you can, there are more threads for our modern mysteries, in particular what we're talking about, okay, these things like the bell, for example, okay, and even for anti-gravity technology, there are more threads, maybe not that many, maybe thin, but at least there are more threads leading back through human history to the ancient times as the source for this development than there are any threads of evidence leading to extraterrestrials. Okay, because let's remember, folks, here comes the unpopular thing. Despite what you think of 70 or not 70 years of 50 years of propaganda, really since 1980, okay, there is no more proof today that Roswell
Oh my
was.
God, has it been 70 years since 1980?
No,
God,
no,
I'm
it's been
old. I
50.
totally forgot that.
It's been 50. That's what I'm saying. The whole Roswell myth thing really took root, with the book, The Roswell.
Charles Berlitz.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that thing, and William Moore. But the point is, there's
I
no
actually
more.
bought a copy of that in the 1980s,
Oh
and
yeah,
I
yeah,
was just floored. It blew my mind.
yeah. But there's no more proof that what happened there was an extraterrestrial event. No more today than there was back then, and so much of the alleged witnesses and the alleged evidence has turned out to be bullshit, or they've turned out to be liars, or they've turned out to not exist. But Roswell is a cottage industry within the UFO community. Okay, there are Roswell being an ET event. There's enough people making money off of this that they are the huge lobby to keep that alive, and they
Well,
don't like it.
certainly,
Point out the facts.
as you've said in some of your books, certainly something happened,
Something
and
happened, I think. Yeah,
and that you believe something happened there.
yeah,
I think it's fair to say that something happened at Roswell because they first were given orders at the 509th Bombing Group to, have the public information officer issue a press release that, hey, we've got one of these flying saucers. And
yeah.
then 4 hours later, after that story had hit the Eastern newspapers, they retracted it completely and said it was a weather balloon. And by
I
the
think.
time it got to the afternoon on the West Coast,
Uh,
it was all, oh, it's just a weather balloon.
I think though the finer point on that was that the officer who had that released, I think he got into a little trouble for doing that. He was kind of jumping the
He was
gun,
following orders.
according to, I think, one particular source or something. But see, and that's the problem with the whole Roswell thing is so much that actually, when you look closely, so much that either it didn't happen that way or it wasn't, it didn't happen at all or whatever, is so part of the mythos that people get actualities, facts mixed up with the mythos. And I
That's
mean,
very
it
true.
would take 5 hours to have a discussion to go through, no, this is crap and here's why, and no, this is true and that's why. But
And this is bullshit, and here's why.
yeah, exactly. And the people who really believe in the ET hypothesis explaining Roswell, they are so emotionally tied to this
Yeah.
that when I'm talking with someone or I deal with someone who their thing is anger, when you say, "Hey, I don't think that's what it was," then I just I kind
They're
of.
not interested in having a real
Yeah,
debate or a real conversation
yeah, I adjust my
where one or
engagement
the
with
other
those
party
folks.
could have their mind changed.
Right. Yeah, I adjust my engagement with those folks because I
Yeah,
I don't
that's a
I
good way
neither
of putting it.
like nor believe in the do not engage thing. I mean, now don't engage the
Of
trolls when it comes
Greg
to.
Bishop's origin. Do not engage.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I because I don't like fence sitting.
right.
I don't respect fence sitting. Um, you know, ultimately, to me, there's a difference between being in the center and being a fence sitter. Those are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You can be in the center on any issue and
Right.
be very actively engaged. Okay. In the world of politics, we know this. We have people in the center who say, hey,
I
I
happen
like
to be a
things on,
centrist myself.
yeah, I like things on the left side. I like things on the right side, and I can be very passionate about
Yeah.
these things. I'm talking about the fence sitting, where you don't know where you stand with someone, you don't know where they stand on. You can know them for years and not know this, and I don't like that because I think eventually you should really know where your colleagues, your associates, they should know where you stand on something. But anyway,
Right.
I got diverted from, people are very passionate about the ET thing, and so I adjust my engagement with those folks with the understanding, okay, this person is religious about this, so
And therefore, you also must adjust your expectation.
yes, of course. Of course. So, yeah, that, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to engage them in the conversation. I'm just going to go, come at it.
I mean, you do have books to sell. Let's face it.
Well, yeah, I try not to, I try not to sell my soul where that's concerned. I always try to be honest and sincere in my positions, even if people don't like some of them. But
hopefully, some of them will come around.
Oh, some of them do. Some of them do. But you know what? I think I'm doing fine with the public here. In this community and with the audience, people get where I'm coming from, and again, I don't play to any audience. I'm meaning I'm not insincere about my positions. If I tell you I think a certain percentage are extraterrestrials, I mean that. I truly believe that. That's what I think, and I just don't think that it's such a big explanation.
One thing I have to say, Walter, that I really like about your approach is that you've done your homework. You've been involved in this community for 25, 30 years.
Well, publicly since 2004.
Right, publicly. But I mean, in general.
Oh my God, that is almost 20 years.
Yeah. and you're not afraid to speak your mind and say, this is what I think and this is what I believe, and let me help connect the dots for you, because once I do so, I think you'll believe this too.
Or at least consider it.
Exactly. And I love the fact that you write nonfiction and fiction both, because in the areas where, and let's face it, you are a top-notch investigator, a top-notch researcher, you do your homework, and it's kind of like Terence McKenna used to say, with psychedelics, that if you go into the river and you bring back many small fish, you can feed the whole tribe. If you go into the river and you grapple with a huge fish, it's probably going to get away, and all you're going to have is a fish story. Right?
Good point. Yeah.
So I really appreciate the fact and respect the fact that you connect the dots for your readers. You don't make them feel like they are betraying a confidence or that you're talking down to them. You're just opening their minds, hopefully, with these dots that you connect, and they're not just like, oh, there's this thing over here and there's this thing over here, let's go ahead and make a line. You actually put together several, points and data points that makes a data set. And I really respect that about your work.
Well, thanks. And I try to do that. And Origin, I think, is one of those examples where I think I've done a pretty good job of it. Even where there are sections of the thread where there's not a lot of points. I think the logic connecting the points that are there is sound. I show you through the 19th into the early 20th century, the German industrialists and technological types who were involved also with Hermetic groups and things. And I present them as likely participants in a secret group like NIMSA, like a NIMSA or the Sonora Club kind of thing.
Tell us what NIMSA is.
Oh, well, we don't know for certain.
And what's the difference between NIMSA and the one with the J?
Okay, the J thing that's what I have injected into the conversation. If you see that comes from my research, specifically a book I did before Origin in the Empire of the Will trilogy, Empire of the Will 2, Friends from Sonora, the first book that I talk about this stuff in. And what that was is it goes back to, we don't know exactly what NIMSA means. Delshau referred to NIMSA as this group. He always used capital letters, which in my opinion could imply an acronym. Okay, so I thought, okay, let's have some fun with this. Mm-hmm. He says it's a German-based organization, which totally throws out the window the previous theories that it was based in New York. There's reasons why people got mixed up, not the least of which was the NY. Now, this acronym is NYMZA. Delshau tells us that it was headquartered in Germany. It was not a New York organization, so the NY does not likely mean New York. Now, I thought, well, gosh, if it is an acronym, what would the words making up the acronym be? Of course, they would be German words. So I talked to native German speakers and non-native, people familiar with German. I have had native German speakers, one or two, say, oh, that's nonsense. Oh, you did that completely wrong. But then I have other native German speakers who say, no, that's accurate. So, what are you going to do? There's always somebody who's going to tell you you're an asshole, whatever. So I thought, okay, what German words could make up this acronym? And I came up with an acronym in German, and then I, translated.
And then I bet you asked Joseph Farrell about it.
Joseph Farrell is one of them, but he's not the only one I referred to. And so then I thought, okay, here's one particular German word that would not begin with a Y in our, in English, like we use in English, but in German, the J can be a Y sound. So I thought, okay.
Yeah.
Anybody who has ever, and you got to follow this, anybody who has ever studied a foreign language, you learn a bit about linguistics. You also learn about transliteration, especially if you're using an alphabet that's not the alphabet we use.
Oh, hey, I had a bar mitzvah. I had to transliterate Hebrew.
Oh,
trust me, yeah, I understand what transliteration is.
I studied Russian for the FBI.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, the FBI sent me to Russian training for a year, and then for 3
years, I had
years,
no idea.
I sat on a FISA wiretap, and translated conversations. So
from Russian?
Yeah, of known GRU agents.
My goodness.
KGB agents. So
you are a lot smarter than I gave you credit for.
Oh, but maybe not as smart as you think. Anyway,
I'm kidding. I've always thought you were a very smart guy.
That uses the Cyrillic alphabet, of course. So you have to transliterate.
Which was created by Saint Cyril.
Yeah, but you have to pronounce Russian words, for English speakers to pronounce Russian words. You
must talk like Walter Koenig.
Yeah, you have to use transliteration, and that means it's not how the Russians would spell the words, but you want the English speakers to pronounce the words correctly, so you use our alphabet, the letters from our alphabet, to spell the word phonetically. Okay?
Right.
That's why you use transliteration.
That's what transliteration is.
Yeah. So that's what I attempted to do.
It's not translation, because you can
Right.
say the words
Translation is
in
definition.
transliteration and not know what the hell you're saying.
Right. So I applied transliteration to what I thought was a reasonable I can't think of the I applied transliteration to this issue, okay? And what I came up with, of course, were the German words, which ended up being NJMZ with a small a. And I thought, okay, this works in transliteration because the J would be a Y. Because in the word Jagdflug or Jagd,
Don't say Safaf.
I'm going to butcher it. So
You know what happens when you say his name.
I have no idea what you're talking
Yog
about.
Sothoth.
Oh, yeah.
If you speak it aloud. Oh,
Yeah.
shit!
So in trying to figure out what NIMSA might have meant as an acronym, I thought I came up with the German words, and then I thought, well, maybe Delshau spelled NIMSA NYMZA as a transliteration.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
As a transliteration.
Yeah.
So that's why, and it's all just a hypothesis of mine. I could be wrong, but I think it's a very reasonable hypothesis.
I love that you say, even in your book, I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't think so.
I don't think so. That's why I committed to a book. But I have a problem with the people, particularly in our community, but anywhere out there, who will, present a speculation, a hypothesis, and it becomes gospel, and then people start referring to that as something that's been proven, and you go, hey, wait a minute, that's never been proven. Gee, case in point, the Roswell ET hypothesis.
Right.
It's never been proven. But
Yeah.
you have hundreds, thousands of people out there that really will say, well, yeah, of course it's been shown and proven that it was an ET thing. You're like, oh my God, it has not.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much in our community that people are just assuming has been proven, because along the way, a lot of the people selling these ideas will not be honest and say, I could be wrong, or this is merely my hypothesis. No, because, hey, there's more popularity in being, showing that cocksurety, that, hey, I'm the guy who knows.
I'm not sure if cocksurety is really a word, but I'll
The word
allow it.
cocksure is.
I'll allow it. I'm looking here for exactly where you say it. Oh, I noticed that you recognize and thank a lot of the correct people in the beginning of the book. And I just wanted to let people know, this book is one of the best, most thorough, best researched books about an idea of any kind that I've ever read.
Thank you. I tried.
This is a book of speculations based on historical research and personal analysis. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Not entirely, anyway.
The research that I did that led to the book was for my presentation at the 2015 Secret Space Program conference. Oh, by the way, if you see me with my hands around my ears, I'm adjusting my hearing aids. I'm still new to this hearing aid thing, so I'm, Anyway, I spoke and presented the basics that you find in that book, part of that book, at the 2015 Secret Space Program conference, the legitimate SSP conference, the last legitimate.
You know
SSP
what? I would have killed to have been there.
Oh, it was something. I went to the 2014 conference, but I didn't speak at it. I spoke at the 2015 conference.
You were casing the joint, right?
Yeah. It was fantastic. All the speakers there were, legitimate researchers who were making great strides in revealing or exposing what appear to be classified human space operations and such through finance, through technology and things like that. The clues all there. Unfortunately, that year was the year that we had, Corey Good and others crammed down our throats by the community. I shame on the media and the community for pushing those guys.
Shame on a lot of people.
They pushed the biggest bullshit line ever with that brand of alleged SSP dialogue, or whatever you want to call it. They pushed that rather than have the researchers who for years had been doing legitimate research, who were uncovering something more real. And what happened was the serious discussion got derailed, and there were no more of the good conferences. And pretty soon these jackass lying space commando time jumpers, ambassadors to bluebirds in space, a-holes, they suddenly were the face and voice of SSP, secret space program stuff. It's offensive. It was bullshit. And again, the people who pushed them, and I know they'll say, hey man, we're all about getting ratings. Well, then you're not about any kind of truth.
You can either be about truth or you can be about ratings.
Yeah, and you know what? You can get ratings with truth. So I don't, their excuse doesn't fly. Well, the ratings, it's no, sorry. Shame on them for anybody who pushed, these morons. Anybody who claims to have been a time-jumping space commando in a secret
with the reptilians from the lower fourth dimension,
blue avians, whatever. All of that is nonsense and bullshit. And
you have to be careful what you step in.
But
and don't eat the yellow snow.
Here's the thing. People say, well, Walter, what about the SSP now? Well, it's in my opinion, the legitimate discussion and research on SSP is a moot issue because, in my opinion,
and for anyone that doesn't know, that means the secret space program.
Yeah, I think that whatever the history of that is will now be folded into Space Force. As far as the American SSP
I do too.
Talking about. I think it's just going to be folded into Space Force. Space Force is the public
Space Force and Tesla or not Tesla, SpaceX and Virgin Galactic and whatever.
Well, these are the
generally speaking.
Yeah, I haven't put much thought into SpaceX and that stuff being connected with SSP, but certainly has benefited from it probably. But
they put up secret payloads all the time.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. They have classified operations. I'm talking when I'm talking about SSP, I'm talking about specifically something that I think started in the late 40s in the United States.
Can you expound on that briefly?
Yeah, it goes back to, here's partially why I proposed what I think my speculation, my hypothesis on Roswell, it could have been America's first attempt at manned space flight. Here's the thing. The men who were involved in aviation medicine in America and in the world, actually Europe too, but in America, this dates back to the 1920s. You say aviation medicine, why is that important? Because aviation medicine gave us life support technology, and that's how you keep people alive in space. And their dream was always, dating back to the 1920s, Colonel Harry, then General Harry Armstrong, and others like him, they were all about putting men into space. And their counterparts in Europe, primarily Germany, were all about this too. And this was,
and that brings to mind Werner Von Braun.
Yeah.
That, according to him, he had always been interested in human space flight, going to the moon and to Mars.
All of them.
But the fact that he used forced slave Jewish labor at Peenemünde and so on and so forth sort of derails his argument that I was just going with the government that had the most money at the time
Yeah.
to advance my idea.
It,
And when Operation Paperclip happened, and they brought him over to the United States, all they had to do was cross out ardent in the sentence, Werner von Braun is an ardent Nazi, and he was fine.
yeah.
And we
they
all
did
grew up thinking he was God's gift to space.
There's a photo of him in his SS uniform.
Yes.
I believe he's smiling, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken. Now, you say, Walter, come on, somebody could have
And
cracked
he
the
knew
joke.
all about Peenemünde and the slave labor and
Of course
the
he did.
Jewish slaves that were being killed and didn't eat very much, weren't fed, all that kind of stuff.
If you weren't positive or ardent, as he was described,
Yeah.
about your association with the SS,
You wouldn't be in it.
well, you might be compelled to, hold your nose under those circumstances, but you wouldn't be, while wearing the uniform, smiling. You'd be kind of reluctant to have a photo of yourself taken in the damned uniform. You wouldn't
be so
smiling.
goddamn gregarious.
Here's my view of von Braun. Yes, due to what he contributed, yeah, America got to the moon. Yes, of course.
First.
What all these guys did. But
And all that means is that in the Second World War, when it was done, we captured the right group of rocket scientists.
Yeah, we captured the group we captured, but I, as a former counterintelligence professional and kind of a student of history, I have mixed feelings about von Braun. He's not this demigod to me. I think he adapted to his new circumstances when he came to America. I have a theory about, which will take way too long to go into, but Operation Paperclip is totally in line with what the Prussian culture had done from the medieval era, and that was invasion through commerce and industry. They started doing this in the medieval era. That's how their particular threat of tyrants eventually got their hooks into all the different Prussian states, and then led to they were the ones pushing the unification of Germany. Then after they got that is when Germany started looking outside of Germany. It's like, okay, now how can we start getting our hooks in other countries around the world? Okay. And
we have to get to our giveaway pretty soon, but before we do, I just wanted to acknowledge the lyrics by Tom Lehrer in his song Werner von Braun. And what was it that put America at the forefront of the nuclear nations? And what is it that will make it possible to spend $20 billion of your money to put some clown on the moon? Well, it was good old American know-how. That's what. As provided by good old Americans like Dr. Werner von Braun. Gather round while I sing you of Werner von Braun, a man whose allegiance is ruled by expedience. Call him a Nazi, he won't even frown. Nazi schmatzi, says Werner von Braun. Don't say that he's hypocritical, say rather he's apolitical. Once the rockets are up, who cares where they come down? That's not my department, says Werner von Braun. Some have harsh words for this man of renown, but some think of our attitude should be one of gratitude. Let the widows and cripples in old London town who owe their large pensions to Werner von Braun. You too may be a big hero once you've learned to count backwards to 0. In German and English, I know how to count down, and I'm learning Chinese, says Werner von Braun.
Yep.
I just think that's hysterical.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you used to hear that on Dr. Demento. A lot of, for anyone who... What I was getting at...
For anyone that doesn't know, Tom Lehrer, last year at the age of 90, made his entire catalog public domain. That's how fucking cool that guy is.
That is cool. That is cool. But you know, another time we can discuss. I think that when Germany was clearly coming to the end of it and losing the war, I think the Nazi infrastructure, the people really, you know, making the Nazi machine work, I think they used this old Prussian medieval tactic of invasion through industry and commerce. And I think Operation Paperclip was just that. They got their talons into America. And I think since the end of the war, because of Operation Paperclip, you know, these are the guys that were really behind founding our military industrial complex. And it's a discussion that we should have, but
without a doubt. Yeah.
I think we were invaded by the Nazi machine at the end of the war. And since then, some of the rotten bad things that have happened in the United States to the United States, and some of the bad things some elements of the United States have done, are the product of this infiltration. And the deeper, longer discussion on that might break your heart.
We'll do it next time.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud to announce that Walter will be a regular guest once a month for the next 6 months.
Yay.
So we'll have plenty of time to get into the nitty-gritty, the granular details, as they say. And I'm really looking forward to that. And I have to say, Walter, tonight has been an eye-opener, not just for me, but for many, many people in the chat. While we're waiting for one of our mods to bring the
wheel,
spinner wheel, because we have to spin it twice.
Yeah.
Because we're going to give away not just a signed copy of your book, but we're also going to give away one of these very fetching T-shirts.
Nice. Yes.
Into the Fringe, with the URL on the back, which if you do decide to go to, see if I can make this segue work, gillstore.com, you can purchase one for pennies above profit as a thank you for being a walking billboard for my channel, so that you can support wonderful guests and researchers like Walter. And I do see that Canadian Spider-Man is here. Welcome.
Hello. Hi.
Hey.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks, Walter. You're fascinating
to listen to. Can we see your
to.
face without the mask? Or do you have to keep the mask on? I mean, it's not super important, but you're not Peter Parker, are you?
Actually, I started a new Facebook page, Canuck Peter Parker. You can find me on Facebook now. Canuck Peter Parker on Facebook. That
Peter
is me.
Parker. I love it. I love it.
I'll turn on the camera. I just wanted time to get on my midnight to midnight T-shirt.
There you go. Look at that. That's a pretty snazzy deal.
Cool.
Right? Yeah. Not bad.
Now, Midnight to Midnight, for anyone that doesn't know, is my very occasional late night show. It doesn't go 24 hours. It just goes, we start at midnight. It's named after a Psychedelic Furs song called Midnight to Midnight. And you wear it very well, Canadian Spider-Man.
Well, I love this shirt. The quality is good.
I'm so glad.
The fit is good. The color is good.
Yeah. And it's got Cardinal Sin right there in the middle.
And I hope to get this guy to sign it someday. It'd be friggin' awesome. Right?
Then you'd have to frame it and put it on the wall.
I could do that.
Yeah.
Walter,
then you
great
just have to wait until you win another shirt.
There's lots of people. The bigger your crowd and audience gets, might be harder and harder, but I look forward to it. It's It's good to
I
have so
do
many
too.
people here with us tonight. There's quite a few people in the chat.
And since there are, let's go ahead and make sure that we have everybody that wants to be involved in the 2 giveaways that we have tonight on the wheel. And Canadian Spider-Man, can you tell me, do we have everyone on the wheel?
Well, let's see. I'm told by our resource department, namely Antiderivative Jill.
We have Antiderivative Jill.
Yes.
You mean
that?
Antiderivative Jill.
So I can't say it like that, but yes, Antiderivative Jill has told me that these are the following names. We have Ivan Ivanovich, Lord Ludicrous Plaid, Milia Grimm, Herc 130, Darius Munchausen, P. Graves, Gap Stargate, Canadian Spider-Man, and Antiderivative Jill. So if there is anyone in the chat,
I see 19 people in the chat right now.
I know, right?
Is there a URL where anybody that wants to be involved in these giveaways can go to?
Funny you should say that. I just dropped it in the chat.
You just did, okay.
I've dropped it several times before.
There we go.
I think you can.
Lord Ludicrous says, I am going to use my Jedi mind trick
That's legal.
to win. And Peter Graves says, great show. Please participate. And there's the link. If you haven't yet entered to win, just go to https://bit.ly into the fringe. And you can enter to win Walter's book. And I have to say, and I'm not saying this because Walter is present, that he can hear me. This is one of the greatest books I've ever read.
Wow.
Thank you. Wow.
And
I've
Walter
read
is
that's
such
big
a
praise.
great researcher and really does his homework
Nice.
and annotates and footnotes his work
That's high praise.
very thoroughly. And before
try.
we do get everybody on
He's
the wheel,
read over 300 books.
well, many, yes. But before we get everybody on the wheel, as people are following that URL that's on the screen, Walter, could you tell us in, I don't know, 2 minutes about your films?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say before I forget, my books are available only at lulu.com, print on demand. They are not at Amazon. You won't find them at Amazon. Lulu.com, LULU.com. My films are a labor of love. Cinema was my first love when I was, younger, and that was the first thing I thought I ever wanted to do was be a film director. I obviously went on a different path, and writing really appealed to me.
You could still be a film director.
Yeah, and I am, and I do these I call no-budget films, where I look at the resources I have, and I make something with those available resources.
And by the way, as to any contribution I may or may not have made, stumm. Okay? Stumm.
Oh,
We don't talk about that. That's
Right,
German
right.
for shut up.
Right. But what I'm attempting to do with my new film that I'm working on is to outdo myself, which some people would say, oh, that won't take much. But I'm making a silent movie, a 1920s style silent film. I like work. I did a film 10 years ago called Hell's Bells, which was a 1920s style silent film. And I like working in the silent vernacular, so to speak. Because yeah, get that? You got that joke, right?
Yeah.
The silent vernacular. Because cinema is a visual medium, right? So in silent film, you're forced to tell the story, more visually and not relying upon dialogue for certain things. And I love working in the black and white. How that looks. And so for me, my films are very much a labor of love. I can get really artistic with them. But this new one, it gets into some very esoteric material. The inspirational sources of this movie are a couple of ancient texts, Egyptian and Tibetan and such, and it's a very symbolic story.
Is it? Would you say it's true that your films are sort of along the same lines as those made by the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society?
Which
in spirit?
I'm wearing their shirt, by the way.
There you go.
H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society Film Productions.
Whisperer in Darkness is my favorite H.P. Lovecraft story, and such a great movie.
Yeah, they did a really fun movie with that. And their silent version of Call of Cthulhu.
I still have to see that.
That's my favorite. Other people have attempted to make versions of Call of Cthulhu. That's my favorite because it's more direct to the material. It doesn't try to tell a version of it. And it's a lot of fun. If you like silent movies, old-fashioned silent movies aren't for everybody because they always think of the herky-jerky comedies. But if you look at, the complete Metropolis, if you look at Frau und Mond.
Oh, I saw for the first time the full-length restored Metropolis.
Oh, yeah.
A month ago or so. I was blown away. There was so much footage that I'd never seen before.
Yeah, I was introduced to it in 2010 when it came out by an old friend of mine from high school. I ended up seeing it 4 times in the theater that year. It just blew me away. It was one of the most impactful films I've ever seen in my life. And it led to me doing silent movies, 1920s, period silent films.
I can't wait until you catch up and start doing talkies.
Talkies, right?
Because there's a lot of great stories.
Yeah, there are, right? Yeah, I don't know.
But now that we've crossed that Rubicon, so to sprechen, let's go ahead and ask Canadian Spider-Man, how many people do we have on the wheel for...
All right.
There he is, right there. Oh, boy, that's the Eye of Cthulhu, if I've ever seen it.
Well, I'm sorry. I was leaning in close to look at something.
Yeah. Let's ask Canadian Spider-Man, how many people do you have on the wheel?
Yes, okay. Well, the lovely anti-derivative Jill has been kind enough to set the wheel up.
Anti-derivative Jill.
Yes, and I have 9 of us on the wheel, including myself and anti-derivative Jill.
And
Darius.
Darius and Gap Stargate.
And Gap Stargate, yes.
Good. And there are 13 people in the chat, so... if there's anybody that wants to get involved in the chat, please put a 1 in the chat so that Canadian Spider-Man can put you on the wheel. Because we've got 2 giveaways to do, and we're already over time.
Big stakes here.
And 14 people, that's correct. And Walter, I can't wait to have you back on Into the Fringe. It's been such a joy, unpacking all this information, and I'm sure it's going to require a double dose next time. But I think that we can do that. Yeah, booster shot. Yeah.
Can I ask a question of Mr. Bosley?
Sure.
In your career, you said you've held a few opinions that maybe weren't the most popular. Your take on Area 51, for example, or Atlantis. What would you say is perhaps your most contentious subject that you've had an opinion on, that you've expressed publicly, I guess, is my question.
I think that the fact that I do not think Roswell was an ET event, that one, I think is probably one of the biggest. I'm sure once I'm off here, I'll think of, hey, wait a minute, there's that other thing. But
at 3:30 in the morning, you'll wake up and go, I've got to call Canadian Spider-Man.
But to talk that,
off the top of my head, it's that Roswell was not an ET event. Also, I think Bob Lazar is full of crap.
You can say full of shit on my channel if you want.
I think at the very best, if he's not making all of it up, I think at the very best he misunderstood wildly something that he glanced at and just went to town on it. But
the fact that Stanton Friedman caught him in messing with his educational background by saying that he went to Caltech and he went to MIT, and both of those schools said we've never heard of him.
Right.
Even at the end of Stanton Friedman's life, and Walter, you have to understand, I put on a Stanton Friedman lecture here in Lawrence, Kansas, in the 90s, back when I put on UFO lectures. He was the first big lecturer I put on.
Oh wow!
And he made such an impression on me. This is a guy that we're talking about that worked in the nuclear rocket industry.
Yeah.
He tested nuclear rockets for space travel, engines that went for a minute, and if they'd gone any longer, it would have melted the entire apparatus, but it proved that fusion engines for rockets would work. And they did it, and they got canceled because they ran out of money, and he went to a different company, and they did the very same experiment, and they ran out of money, and that's eventually why he became a UFO lecturer.
I just remembered what that other thing that is contentious for some people. From the get-go, I have always thought and expressed it that the Tic Tac UFO is advanced classified technology.
And it's very interesting, I think, that the only people that have seen it are the military, with the exclusion of the one case that you've talked about.
So that one pisses off a fair number of people, and I don't care. I stand by that.
And that's why I love you, Walter, because you don't care who you piss off.
You know what?
The facts are the facts. The capital T truth is the capital T truth.
Yeah. As time has passed on since we were first exposed to that, more and more people are agreeing with me. Yeah. And the facts are showing and proving that that's what it was.
Either you're a seeker of truth or you're full of shit.
So
anyway,
those are the three biggies.
Having said that, Canadian Spider-Man, can we get that wheel up? Earth to Canadian Spider-Man.
Yes, indeed. I just have noticed, Cardinalson, forgive me, I just noticed that Andy Masterson has just joined the chat.
Andy Masterson.
He has and I don't have him on
the whole time.
Has he?
Yes.
I didn't see his name added to the wheel anywhere.
I thought you said hi to him earlier. Yeah, right
nevertheless,
here. He said, "Hail, Canadian Spider-Man." At 9:04 p.m.
He hasn't entered the competition.
Well, I think he wants to be entered.
I'm just going to add him manually onto the wheel.
And here he says, "Hail Gap Stargate" at 8:59 p.m.
And remember,
and hail my friends at 8:58 p.m. Let's just say he's been here for a long time, and he's certainly worthy of being in the running to win an incredible book autographed by the one and only Walter Bosley, and a Into the Fringe T-shirt.
I want to add that if the winner spends $100 at your store, I'll actually sign my name in the book.
Ooh.
That's one of my favorite jokes.
I love it.
Stuff, I'll say, "How much will you give me if I sign my name in the book?"
There you go.
Now,
I'm kidding. I will be signing my name in the book.
And hail Tolfer. Yes. Okay.
Let's share the screen with you.
yeah, let's get this thing going. I'm just eager to see what happens. I can't wait.
Share the screen, okay. And share audio, okay.
Yeah, we've got to hear that wheel going. That's part of the anticipation.
Share, and then let's go here.
Okay.
How's that, sir?
Wow, a lot of names on there.
Yep.
That looks, you can see that clearly?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to turn up the volume, and I've got the volume set. You should be able to hear it. I can spin on your command.
Let it be mote so. Peter Graves! Congratulations.
Congratulations, Peter Graves.
So Peter Graves will win a copy of the book, and then the next one will be for an Into the Fringe t-shirt.
Okay. At your command, I shall press spin.
You may spin.
Malia?
Congratulations.
Malia Grimm. Fantastic.
Fantastic.
It pays to stay for the whole stream.
That's true.
But honestly,
Right.
I could listen to you guys talk for hours.
Well, I appreciate that. Now, I want to try to... Oh, you did it.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yes,
Because
I
last
was
time
able
that
to.
we did this, I ended up kicking you out with the wheel, and I apologize about that, Canadian Spider-Man. I felt really badly about that, but everyone needs to know, anytime you win something on my channel, all you have to do is go to my channel's About page, and you'll find my email address there, and just send me an email with your mailing address and your t-shirt size if you happen to win a t-shirt, etc., and I'll make sure that everything goes to those who won. And to those who didn't win, there's always next week. And while we're speaking of next week, I would like to mention that next week we are going to have the first of 2 abduction roundtables. Next week we're going to have Kathleen Marden and Denise Stoner on our abduction roundtable 1, and the week after that we're going to have Peter Robbins, Terry Lovelace, and Deb Cobble, who's better known as Kathy Jordan from the Bud Hopkins book Intruders. So we're really going to dig into the nitty-gritty of the abduction experience twice, and there will be books available there, shirts available there, and it'll also be a very eye-opening experience. So I can't wait for those to happen. And while we're still on, please let all your friends know, and even the people you hate, how great you think the show is, or the Cardinal Sin channel is, the giveaways, whatever it is you like about this. Please spread the word, and for fuck's sake, subscribe. God damn it.
It doesn't hurt. It's free. Did you know that? They've made it free now.
To subscribe.
You might as well take advantage.
And very soon, I'm going to be having my 600 subscriber spectacular celebration. I know that Canadian Spider-Man will be there. I have it on very good authority that Maria and Tracy from T and Telly will be there. I don't know if Walter will be there. Maybe, maybe not. He's certainly invited.
Cool, thanks.
But yeah, it's going to be a good time, and it's just a celebration of a milestone. It's like a bar mitzvah. It's
Mm-hmm.
you recognize the passage of into manhood. So
Yes.
that's kind of what's happening with my channel.
Yeah, you have to
So there'll
celebrate
be cigars and
Absolutely.
landmarks.
Yeah.
fantastic.
So, Canadian Spider-Man, thank you once again for
Thank you.
helping us with the wheel.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Pleasure to.
It's a
have you on,
powerful thing, that wheel. There's so
I
much
like it.
anticipation.
I like it. Yeah, it's awesome to come here, listen to great stories, and listen to the two of you discuss the topics, and then you win prizes at the end. Who else
What
does
could
that?
be better?
There's almost nobody. I'll see you. I'll see you both later. But and thanks for joining us, Walter. Great.
Sure.
Thanks for being generous with your time.
Sure,
Cardinal Sin.
absolutely.
Awesome. I will see you a bit
Thank
later.
you, sir. Appreciate your service. And that was Canadian Spider-Man. So, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Walter, once again, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your generosity with the autograph book. And I'm going to go ahead and pack up Origin with the rest of my unsigned books and send them off to you with a beautiful silver magic marker that you can keep.
I still have the other one, so
Well, I'll send you another one.
okay.
Markers are inexpensive, but
already.
I do want to thank you once again for being my guest, and I'm very much looking forward to next month when we have you again.
I thank you for having me on, Gil. I really enjoy this. I love talking with you, and I look forward to the next time, definitely.
As do I. And that'll do it for tonight. So it's Cardinal Sin out.